The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Christine Westerlin here at the Illinois Association of Community Action Agencies, and
Susan Wilson from CEFS in Effingham.
we're so happy that you're with us again on this ROMA Wednesday, as I think we can now rename Wednesday into ROMA Wednesday.
Sure.
Don't you think so?
I think it should be ROMA Wednesday.
All right, ROMA Wednesday it is. So we're going to spend some time with you this morning, kind of talking through the implementation process for ROMA. This is a continuation. This is our third webinar. Isn't that hard to believe, Susan, that we're doing webinar number 3?
Number 3.
Number 3. I have a question that's popped up. Hopefully it is. Melinda Hopper is wishing us all a good morning. Good morning, Melinda.
Good morning.
Illinois Valley is where Melinda works. Known Melinda for a long time. We'll go ahead and just get ourselves started as we typically do. See if I still can do these slides. Sometimes they cooperate with me, sometimes they don't. Just to, again, give a shout out to our partnership with DCEO. This is a collaboration webinar between DCEO and ICA, so we're really happy for DCEO's support for this and the opportunity to share information about ROMA. There are our mugs right there, so you can kind of figure out what we look like when we talk. Susan, you're both a trainer and an implementer.
I am.
Yeah.
So I do in-house. I work with some paperwork, making sure that everything is aligned to the ROMA standards. And I'm more than happy to come to your agency or go to your agency and do some training if that's what you would like after some of these restrictions have been lifted. I will be happy to come and share what I know.
Well, absolutely. And I will just remind those of you on this webinar today that Susan is our downstate representative, our Southern Illinois representative for ROMA trainer. And I think also being both dually certified as an implementer and trainer, I think gives you, Susan, some really great insight on not just how you teach ROMA, but also how do you embed ROMA at the agency.
Yeah, in many cases, it's already embedded. We just kind of reveal that it's there and document that it's there.
Absolutely. And I'm a master trainer. I've been a ROMA trainer for almost 20 years, which seems hard for me to say that out loud, but it's true. So I must have been a teenager when I took this on. But anyway, enough about that. As we do with these webinars, we want to recite together the promise of community action, highlighting all the action words that appear in this promise, this national promise of community action. So you may say it along with us, or you may say it silently. But again, just to keep in mind, this is really the promise that we hold for our customers that and our communities that really need our services, especially in this time. So, community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. All right, very good. So as a reminder, since we are on ROMA webinar number 3, what we are doing, this has been a deliberate attempt to work the ROMA cycle. So we have already talked quite a bit about assessment, the need, what community needs and what resources are available. That's that needs assessment that you do. What about the agency data? We spent quite a bit of time talking about mission statement and assessment data, so you are beginning to identify results and strategies. And now we're moving into implementation and kind of starting to nudge our way into achievement of results. We really want to talk about services and strategies that produce results. And so here we are back again. I think in the past couple of webinars, we have referenced Peter Drucker's work. Peter Drucker's work is a big influence on the ROMA curriculum that we offer to all of you. And so one of the questions that Peter Drucker asked, what is our plan? What are we going to do? How are we going to implement this? And I think this quote by Drucker, I think, sums it up pretty well for us, that work doesn't get done by a magnificent state of policy. Work is only done when it's done by people who are properly informed, assigned, and equipped.
And Christine, informed, assigned, and equipped. These are the attributes that we plan for both in our ROMA cycle and during the logic model.
Absolutely. And I think it's the real assigned that really kind of, and when you and I spoke about this yesterday, and you really highlighted that word assigned, I think that's such a key piece of this. Who is assigned to do this work, right?
Right. And that's the beauty of the logic model is who makes the records, who records it, where do they record it? And so, we all know that the work's being done, but we really need to document who does what, when, where, how, and where's it put down? Is it in stars? Is it on paper documents? Is it in your files? Where do you document this?
Absolutely. So I know at the end of each of these webinars, we show the logic model at the end. If you are actually in the full day ROMA training, we do a logic model throughout the entire day. And so we really want to, again, encourage all of you to consider the use of the logic model. I know that there is not a strong use of the logic model by some agencies, and I understand why that is, but to just kind of place in your thinking that this is really an extraordinarily beneficial tool for your agency to really think about all these kind of bringing together of all the work that you're doing.
Yes, when we do full day trainings, there's a large poster of that is posted on the wall for you to see, and you'll be given handbook manuals that have it in there, and then you will work on one yourselves too, so you can see how you're just taking what you already do and putting it into a roadmap so it clarifies for you, and boy, what a great tool for new employees so they can see how things are done.
Right, exactly. It is that chain of information, those if-then relationships that are so important. So thinking about Peter Drucker's work, but now we're kind of, and what is our plan? But in order to kind of fill out this plan, to kind of think more about accountability and implementation of the plan, we're going to now turn to Reginald Carter. Reginald Carter wrote The Accountable Agency a few years ago, and he used his experiences when he worked for the Michigan Department of Social Services, which is the equivalent of our DHS, and probably DCFS combined. But his book really posits questions, just like Drucker, ask these questions about how is it that we're going to implement our plan. There's a picture of Dr. Carter right there. I've had the pleasure of meeting him once and several years ago, and really just a really lovely, very thoughtful, brilliant man. And so I think we need to think about these questions as we move forward with implementation. So here they are.
How many clients are you serving? Who are they? What services do you give them? And then we'll skip to number 6. What happens to the clients as a result of these services? Now, the ones that are not highlighted, I'll refer to the cost of services. And although that's extremely important, that is a whole nother set of webinars. So we'll skip those for today, or else we would be here for a very long time. So we'll just talk about who are they, how many are there, what services do they get, and then the ultimate question, what happens, what changes?
And thank you for just focusing on the 4 today, Susan, because we would have to deliver lunch to everybody who's on this webinar today, right?
A virtual lunch.
A virtual lunch, yes, absolutely. And have a virtual happy hour down the road. So,
Of course.
Of course. All right, are we ready to kind of tackle the first one?
Let's look at the first question.
All right. So Carter question, the key question number 1 is how many clients are you serving?
All right, so How do you base that on? How many clients do you base that on? The budget that you have? Do you base that on the needs of your community? Do you base it on the interest of the community? How many people want to be involved? But you need to remember that this cannot be duplicated. It's a very, very good thing to have one family served by many programs in your agency, but they remain one family in your record. An unduplicated count really does make a big difference. And something else you need to consider is, when do they become a customer or a client or a participant in your program? Do they become one when they walk in, when they're done in stars, when they've completed a paper intake, or do you not consider them a customer until they receive a service? There's no one right answer, it depends, but you have to make that determination. When do you count them, and how many of them are there?
Yeah, and I think it's really, in many ways, the guidance tells us that it's up to the agency to decide when that customer is a customer, correct?
Yes. Um, for some programs, they might not count until their STARS application is complete. For others, it might be until after they've received a service. So I don't know, I can't tell you the answer to that. It depends on your program, depends on your agency, and it depends on your administration and your staff, how it's determined.
Right. And I know that some of our agencies are really structured around just as information referrals. And so that might be, if a customer calls in or visits and is looking just simply for a service at another agency, can you count that as a referral? And does that then individual become a customer? So I think these are things that the agency really needs to have that discussion, particularly when you are undergoing your planning processes. I think that will clarify some of the activities and services and strategies that you're going to have to put into place.
But keep in mind that referrals are valid
Very
services
much so.
with potential outcomes. So count them. You know what? Go ahead and make your don't be afraid to count referrals, because we already know that you do that. So document it, make it count.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not in any way suggesting that a referral is not that. I think a referral is valuable, knowing and counting that referral is valuable. And I think the other thing, and we're not going to belabor it, but I think there are some issues with agencies trying to get to that unduplicated count. I know many agencies use secondary spreadsheets to try to be able to pull that out. I know that in CSBG only, I think it's possible to get on duplicate account, but if you're working with a customer who receives multiple services, that's when it becomes a little dodgy to try to figure out, is this, am I counting this customer more than one time?
All right.
So
On to question 2.
Yes, here's question 2. So who are they?
Well, that should be identified in your plan. Is it a certain age group, like seniors, you are targeting? Is it dependent on housing status, employment status? Probably location too. For example, CEFS covers 7 counties. So if they're outside of our 7 county, for most of our programs, they wouldn't qualify. So who or whom do you serve?
Yeah, and I think, not only it notes there that this data can clarify and enrich the outcome information, but we're often being asked for reports that have targets certain populations. How many, people with disabilities are you serving statewide? How many people of a certain gender are you serving statewide, or of a certain age? So we need to, do this. I know that this is routine work for us, but to really clarify for us just the value of doing this work and gathering all of this data.
All right.
And here's number 3. What services do you give them?
You must be able, go ahead, Christine, finish.
Oh, I was just going to say, we really have to make that determination, what customers are expected to receive a service that results in a specific outcome. So what is it that you're trying to really structure and provide to these individuals that come to your agency seeking services?
And it's important to be able to measure those services, hours of education or numbers of meals provided or number of rent payments made, or maybe just a change in a housing level from in crisis to stable. That's a measurable change. It's important to be able to make sure that your services can be measured so you know that they're effective.
And I think another key piece that comes along with that in the measurement is that you want to ensure that you're able to assess the quality of the services offered too. So that's why it's important for you to talk to your customers to see if they're satisfied with their services. Again, this whole ROMA cycle that we're working here, we're constantly in a place of assessment, and we do want to ensure that the services that we're providing are of high quality and are what the customers need. And again, it's a bolded sentence, but it's an important sentence for us to really hang on to. It's the importance of determining that relationship between the service and the expected outcome. I know that over time, sometimes we will see where the service is applied and then the outcome is something completely different.
Yes.
My favorite one, this used to be in the ROMA manual years ago, is that it was a congregate meal for seniors. And so, so that was what the service that was offered. And then the outcome was, and this was an actual outcome from another state, the outcome is that seniors were able to increase their mobility due to that daily meal. And okay, perhaps there's some connection there somewhere, but we didn't see it when it described the service. We didn't see that that was the intention of the service. The intention was to provide a meal, some nutrition, to ensure that your hunger is satisfied. So again, that relationship.
Right. The intent was probably these seniors are getting out of the house, but that's not the way it was written.
Right.
And so you need to be very clear that the relationships are identifiable.
Exactly. And then here's Carter question number 6. And what happens to the customers as a result of the service? Isn't that the question that we are constantly asking ourselves? I would hope so.
Yes. What changes do we expect? You have to identify the number of customers who are expected to identify the outcomes to be achieved by the customer's participation in the service. And then the number who succeeded at achieving those. So there's a lot of numbers coming up, and don't be intimidated by that. I'm going to do my best to make it very clear, but when you plan, you have to figure out, you have to guess, you have to make an educated and informed, optimistic and realistic guess as to how many people you expect to provide services to and how many people you optimistically and realistically expect to succeed in that. Right. It's difficult to assign or link expected outcomes when there are multiple services, but it doesn't have to be a 1-to-1 ratio. On the bottom 4 bullets, the first one says 1 service, 1 outcome. You provide a box of food, the family has nutrition for a time period. That's easy enough, but that's not all we do. In fact, in order to eliminate the effects of poverty, it usually takes multiple services linked with multiple outcomes, and that's good. You've probably heard the term of breaking down silos. This is when we do it. When one program from your agency links with another program from your agency, and even from a different agency, you work together to eliminate the effects of poverty. So it's good. We work together to break down all those barriers. So just be aware when you're reporting, it doesn't have to be a 1-to-1 relationship of services and outcomes. You can take multiple outcomes from one service or one outcome from multiple services. I say, Christine, whatever works.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Susan. And I'm thinking back to last week's webinar, in which we had the difference between a provision of services model and then the strategic thinking model. And a lot of times when we see that one service, one outcome, that's great. I mean, and again, and that's like the food box, I think is really one of the best examples of that. But oftentimes we're not looking then beyond that food box. So that's where looking at multiple services, one outcome, multiple services, multiple outcomes becomes more of that strategic process, or a service bundling, or whatever you would call it at your agency. We hear a lot of those terms thrown out there for us, but really, when we think about service bundling from this perspective, it's so important for us to see how we're serving the whole family or the whole individual, rather than alleviating hunger. Again, an important thing to do, but there's more to it than that. If someone is hungry, we can probably make the connection that there's other services that can be provided.
That's absolutely right.
So when we talk about outcome indicators, so we talked about outcomes, and that's a statement. And so when we talk about indicators, that is when we add in a numeric value to that, a number, how much or how many. And typically there's this SMART, if you will, acronym. That's it. I was trying to come up with, is it mnemonic or something like that? That's another word.
That works too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. But again, it reminds us that this is what we would need to think about whenever we're considering these outcome indicators. Is it specific? Right? Is it actually measurable? And that's always a question I think you have to ask whenever you're putting your planning together. And then once you're implementing, we have to be able, as Susan said, to measure it earlier. Do we have a scale, or is there some other way that we can look at progress? Is it
in the world of ROMA, if you can't measure it, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it doesn't exist.
And you can make things that you wouldn't think of being measurable. You can turn them into something measurable. If you have a scale and somebody goes from in crisis to stable, or from
vulnerable, maybe
vulnerable to thriving.
Yeah.
You can have a numeric scale for those things. And in the full ROMA training, we do spend quite a bit of time on that. And so measurable does matter a lot.
Absolutely. And I think, again, and you used the word just a few minutes ago, is it achievable? Is it practical? It has to be aspirational, certainly, but aspirational, in a way that you can reach it, right?
Yes.
So, and it could be, again, if you're looking at somebody who is seeking perhaps a new job or some job training, you start out incrementally. So once they complete and receive a certification, that is a measurable achievement. If that individual then from that certification gains employment and remains employed for 90 days, that's an achievement, so on and so forth. Is it relevant? I think that's another key piece of it too. Is it relevant for that individual? Is it needed for that? And is it not only is it achievable, but is it useful to that individual? And then finally, there always has to be a time frame, right? This, we can't do this to infinity and beyond. This has to be
right.
Yeah, it has to have, it could be, again, immediate need met, or perhaps it's a program where they're enrolled in, again, a training program or financial literacy or a literacy program. So they are gaining and moving forward, but there has to be an end to that as well in order to measure.
I'd like Christine to refer back to achievable. Don't shoot for 100%. That's usually not achievable. Almost nobody is 100% successful at everything. If you have a goal of registering 100 customers for a program, it might be reasonable to expect a 30% success rate of completion. It depends on so many factors. You should be optimistic, but you also need to be realistic. We'd love for you to be 100% successful, but we all know that that's not likely to happen. So achievable, it could be a 10% success rate, and you know what? It could be 100% success rate. I don't know. Just be reasonable, make it achievable, but be optimistic too.
Yeah, and thank you, Susan. I think that you described that so much better than I did. But I think that's exactly what it is. It has to be with an eye on the practical side of life. So whenever we identify outcome indicators, and as we've talked about this, we kind of want to just provide an example to you what this might look like. And school success is something that I think that we all claim, or we try to provide programs around this idea of people being successful in school. So you have to drill down into what is it that you intend to measure, or what indicates that school success is actually happening. So here are some ones that I think are pretty straightforward. Our grades improved, right? That's always the key piece. That's like always number one, and that's measured by the report card. That's where you can see where progress is being made. Are there reduced absences? That's a key piece to school success as well. Are you actually physically present? Are you attending the classes? And that data would also show up on the report card. And then finally, improved behavior. And this would be observations from the teacher. We know that that is something that teachers do on a regular basis. It is a part of their job, and they can measure to indicate if behavior is being improved. The first two are quantitative, and the last one is qualitative data.
Yes, you're right, but you can actually quantify a lot of behaviors. For example, the reduction in the number of timeouts for that student, or perhaps an increase in the number of kind words they've said. It is possible sometimes to quantify things you didn't think would be quantifiable. So what we're looking for regardless is a change. An outcome indicator puts a numeric value on the change. So sometimes, though, as we said last time, a change is really just a maintaining stability. So for example, if the student is performing poorly in school, then they get better. Just keeping it that way is still a success. It's still an outcome to maintain the quality that was there before.
Great. Thank you, Susan. That's very helpful. So here's an example of multiple indicators for an outcome. And so this is, I think this is a common service that many of our agencies provide, employment and training services to 50 customers. So we see what the primary indicator is going to be. 10 of 50 customers obtain full-time jobs above minimum wage with benefits, and they are able to maintain that employment for 90 days.
So our projected number of participants is 50. Our projected number of successes is 10. And how will we know if they succeeded? Because they obtained a full-time job above minimum wage with benefits, and they maintained employed for 90 days. That is our indicator.
Absolutely. Right. But what we can see then out of this, there are other indicators that we also need to gather data on as well. So when we see that we had 50 customers and 20 of them were able to obtain permanent full-time jobs at a minimum wage without benefits, that is also an outcome. And the indicator is that 20 of those 50 were able to become employed. Not at the level of the primary indicator, but nonetheless, that is an achievement. We looked then at 10 of those 50 were able to obtain part-time temporary jobs. It's employment, nonetheless, looking at it from that perspective, we don't know what those part-time temporary jobs are going to lead to, but we know that 10 of those 50 were able to reach that. We know that 5 of the 50, were able to obtain on-the-job training opportunity, which could lead to a job. That's typically when we see that language, that is what we believe it will happen. And then also 5 of those 50 remain unemployed 180 days after the program while they're in the program. So again, these are all relative, very needed outcomes that we need to collect, and understanding these indicators is that we can see where folks are at, and perhaps this is an opportunity for us, I should say, to see, okay, what did the 10 do right? That maybe we can encourage, the others and the other indicators to make some changes. Anything to add to that, Susan?
Nope, you did beautifully.
Thank you. Just I want to put a pin in this. We know that we hear about the Community Action National Performance Indicators. We call them the NPIs. Just to remind all of us that the NPIs are really a selective sampling of what we do, and this is what we do nationally, all across all 50 states and the territories, and to reflect only a portion of our work and accomplishments. We do this because we have to tell not only our local story of community action, but there's also a national story to tell too. And so whenever there's a battle for funding, or we're trying to talk about our relevancy to the nation, is that we use these indicators to say we were able to, nationwide and across the territories, we were able to fulfill. We had this many people gain employment. We had this many people remain housed in their homes. This many seniors were able to receive a congregate meal. We were able to provide transportation, looking at it from the broader scope of the work that we do in community action. But also, we do this each year. There's the CSBG annual report, the information that you put into STARS. DCO looks at that, and then that information is fed to, up to OCS, and NASCAS that plays an important role in that as well. But also that you're encouraged to continue reporting annually on your full range of outcomes. And I think that's key for us too, because again, they're watching trends and trying to see what's emerging, what are some new practices, what are some new things that we need, or is it regionally there's issues, in the Midwest versus issues in the South. And so it's important for us to look at these national performance indicators and to report on our full scope of the work that we do.
All right.
All right, so now we come into calculation time.
What are our outcome indicators? Remember, an outcome indicator puts a numeric value on a change, and it includes a time frame. So A would be the projected number of people you expected to achieve the outcome. Probably you'll do B first, the total number of persons receiving the service. You want to have a program where you help, it doesn't matter. It depends on, not that it doesn't matter, it depends so much on what you're doing. You might have 5 people in a program, you might have 500 people in a program. That would be your B. And A is how many of them do you expect to be successful, to achieve a positive change? That would be A. And then C is your time frame. So do we have an example on the next slide? Let's see.
I think so. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
All right, measuring performance and establishing standards. We have to, like in ROMA, if you don't measure it, it doesn't happen. So let's do some measuring.
Okay. So what we're going to do then is that, thinking about this formula that that Susan just shared with all of us, then we need to really think about estimating customer performance. So first, what we need to do is that we need to identify what we believe the outcome will be, which is that qualitative statement. So we can connect that directly to Carter question number 6. Next, we look at the identification of services, or identify the services rather, expected to produce the outcome. That's Carter question 3. And we want to identify the number of people receiving the service, Carter question 1. And then we want to then look at the outcome indicator, which becomes that quantitative statement. So when we're estimating performance by doing that calculation, and each of these steps occur prior to the delivery of the service. So you're estimating what you believe will happen.
Estimating customer performance is really, it's part of planning. Imagine trying to use Google Maps without first putting in a destination. You can still drive, but you don't know when you got there.
Very true. All right, so here are some formulas for us to kind of consider. And Susan, I'll let you kind of walk through.
All right, look at box 1, top left. What we predicted was that 7 families would increase their household income. What we projected was that 20 families would become enrolled in this. That was optimistic and realistic, that we would have 7 families succeed out of 20 families who enrolled. That's box 1. Below that in pink is box 2, our actual success rate over our projected success rate. We had 5 families who actually did increase their household income, and again, 20 families is our projected participation rate. So that gave us a 25% success rate. So the first one is projected over projected. The second one is actual over projected, but we're not done yet. We're going to go to box 3. Box 3 in blue is our actual success rate over our actual participation numbers. Notice that we estimated our percent fairly well. We estimated a 35% success rate. We got 33% rate. That's not too bad, except that we fell a bit short in estimating our number of participants. Look back at box 1 in the gray. We predicted we would serve 20 families. Back to box 3 in the blue, we actually had 15 families who completed the requirements for this program. So either we didn't recruit enough families, or maybe some families dropped out, moved away, whatever. We predicted from box 1 that 7 families would increase their household income. That would be a 35% success rate. Back to box 3 in the blue, 5 families successfully increased their household income at a 33% rate. So we were, again, pretty good at predicting our percentage of success, fell a little bit short on predicting the numbers included. Now there is a 4th box on targeting, and Christine, we're going to skip a few, we're going to address that after we do a few other slides.
Right.
But actual performance and reduced, it's okay. What you do is you report the truth. You report your actual performance, box 2. Your actual performance was 5 over your projected participation was 20. No one expects you to be 100% accurate in planning your numbers. The COVID-19 situation, perfect example of the best laid plans going awry. So we will discuss targeting coming up, but the pink box, actual performance, box 2, is the one that you will use in your reporting.
Okay. You always do such a beautiful job, Susan. Thank you.
Well, thanks. I had a good teacher. It was you.
So what we want to do is kind of draw an analogy out for you, or do a kind of something that we're all very familiar with. And I think many of us are baseball fans. Baseball is the classic American sport, as we like to call it. There's records that indicate that baseball, or a form of baseball, was being played during the Civil War, for example. But really, it was since the 1890s when baseball became more formalized and became recognized as a sport. They began doing something that we all do. They started collecting data. And the power of that is that they've been able to establish performance standards that we all completely understand because it's been embedded in their work since the 1890s, and they've been able to use that data to tell their story.
Yeah, Americans love their baseball. And you know what? People know these statistics. They love them. They Google them. Baseball fans are the masters of outcomes and outcome indicators. They don't call them that. They call them stats, but that's exactly what they are, outcomes and outcome indicators.
Yeah, and I don't know. One of the outcomes of this is that there were the creation of baseball cards. Because you wanted to have in the hands of children a card that expressed data that really spoke to these performance standards that they were able to share on these really fun collectible cards. This is the back of a card of Yogi Berra. He's probably a very familiar name to you if you know anything about baseball. And he was obviously affiliated with the New York Yankees. Now, don't boo out there because we're talking about the Yankees. But we also
But
have
nobody can boo Yogi Berra. Come
no,
on.
no, that's true. Yeah, he is just one of those icons of the game. And
Oops, I
so,
lost you.
pardon me, are you still there, Susan? Susan?
Christine?
Yes, I'm here.
Hmm.
Can people hear
Okay,
us?
I got you now.
Okay,
I don't
okay.
know what happened.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. But let's look at the bottom of this card just briefly, and not to belabor this, but we see on the back of this card is about the size of the palm of your hand. Again, collectible cards. This card probably whoever owns it today is worth probably a lot of money. But we see that on the bottom of this card, we see what Yogi did in the past year and then also over his lifetime. And then all of these data points that they've collected about him, noting probably the one that we want to pay most attention to is to what his batting average is. So we see in this past year, and I'm not sure what year this card is. I'm just looking. It doesn't tell me, but his batting average in the past year was 2.94, but his lifetime is 2.99. So that's about 300. We can safely say we can round up by one, can't we, on this one?
Absolutely.
Right. And so this demonstrates to us that when Yogi Berra was at bat, he was hitting that ball 1/3 of the time. 1/3, right? More or less.
Yeah, more or less, right.
Yeah, so that's what? That would be one ball out of every 100 that he was hitting, maybe?
1 out of 3, or yeah, 1 out of 3 times he hit the
That's it.
ball.
That's it. Yeah. So yeah, and so when we think about him, he is an icon. We still tell Yogi Berra stories, because he was known for kind of changing thing. When you come to the fork in the road, take it. Would say things like that. He's something that we think about when we think about the history of baseball. He's one of the leading names that we talk about, but he was only successful 30% of the time at hitting, and he's in the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame in New York. He is considered to be an extraordinary standout player.
Right. Everybody knows his name, and he was successful 1/3 of the time. Christine, you want to go back one? I just want to show people. Um,
This one?
yes. Notice how they have at bat, which would be the number of times he would be, how many times he had a possibility of succeeding. Then he's got his hits. How many times was he successful? And then they give 2 different time frames for 1 year and for a lifetime. So baseball does the same thing Roma does. They just put different names on it.
Yeah, and I really,
Opportunities, successes, and time frames.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with all of us. And so, what are some of the things that we've been able to learn from baseball over time? What did baseball do that we don't? Well, they clearly were able to define their performance indicator, right? You hit and get on base.
Clear. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you relate that to the outcome, which is what? Winning the game, I would guess.
It depends. For some people, winning the game is the ultimate outcome. For some, hitting a home run. For some, hitting a grand slam. For some, getting on base. It depends what your outcomes are. And same thing in your agency. Giving a person a place to stay that night is a very important outcome, but getting them permanent housing is also an important outcome.
Absolutely. And so what they were able to do is that they observed performance and they kept records of that performance. And they didn't do it with a computer. I suspect back in the 1890s, and who knows, even earlier than that perhaps, they were able to use a piece of paper and a pencil. And they were able to keep records that tell the scope, that are produce these baseball cards, produce those conversations. When you go to a ballpark today, you have a board that, the big screen that flashes each batter's stats whenever they are walking towards the plate to swing. They were able to analyze that data and share it with all of us. And then they were able to develop a benchmark of excellence based on what they were analyzing. So they have determined that if a batting average is a 300 or above, then you are considered a superstar player.
Who thought baseball and Roma would have so much in common?
I know. It's made me have deeper appreciation for baseball. I'll just say that out loud. And you can all share that with that. Christine actually said that on this day. Um, but what's really interesting too, I think, Susan, is that baseball has also undertaken, not only do they have this great data and so we can understand their standards of performance and we can compare this, but they're always improving what it is they do. They have figured out, are we manufacturing better bats? Do we need to think about the pitching mound size? And there's a lot of detail to baseball that we don't see, but yet they're committed to continuous improvements because they want to see their game to continue. And it hasn't really changed their outcomes so much, their performance standards, but it's because they've committed to really maintaining what baseball is telling this wonderful, deep, rich story of this American pastime.
Very good, Christine. Well said.
Thank you. I am not apologizing for the Cubs emblem that's on this particular slide. I'm just putting that out there.
No apology necessary.
Okay.
We are in Illinois.
We are in Illinois. And so I know all the Cardinal fans are making gestures right now. Okay. So then we want to think about then what are success measures in other industries? Again, this is something that we have to undertake and have these conversations about how do we identify our performance standards. So what do we know about movies, right?
Well, if you remember, I said that don't expect 100% success. Very, very few programs, very few agencies, very few anything gets 100% success. And movies, you all know Titanic and E.T. and The Wizard of Oz. But Christine, did you know Forbes magazine said that 80% of Hollywood films lose money?
Yeah, that's an extraordinary number, 80%. When we think that movies seem to, rake in a lot of money. We pay so close attention to movies. We award movies. We have Academy Awards and the Cannes Film Festival, and I could go on. But yet, it's 80%. Wow.
80% lose money. So assuming some of them break even, then less than 20% make money. Less than 20% are profitable. But did they give up? Do they stop making movies because less than 20% make any money? No, they keep going, don't they?
They do. And we all love our movies.
Yes.
I think the next interesting one to kind of laser focus is on prescription drugs.
We all know Bayer and some of the big companies make a lot of money, but of all the drugs that they develop compared to the ones that actually make it to market, Christine, it's far worse than Hollywood films. Only 1 in 5,000 developed drugs actually make it to market.
That's such an incredible number because I think what I know about the prescription drug companies is that they have to be making money hand over fist with all of the success that they have, but that's not true. 1 in 5,000.
So yeah, the one is extremely successful and they're doing quite well with it, but the 4,999 didn't even make it to market. So their success rate is extraordinarily low.
Yes, but we still view them as being very successful, right? So they
are
right, and they've educated us really on what their standards of performance are. And then we've just talked through what baseball has taught us, but we also have to look to other industries to understand that we cannot take that 1964 attitude, if you will, and have this idea that our customers are going to be 100% successful. That simply is not going to happen, and it's okay if it doesn't happen.
Christine, you know that I have a fruit and vegetable farm, and I go to the farmer's market, and people always say things like, oh, your peaches are fabulous, or your asparagus is so wonderful, or these zinnias and irises you grow are just gorgeous. And in my head, I'm thinking, what you don't know is all the dead ones. What you don't see is all the bug-eaten, diseased fruit that's in my compost pile. What you don't see is all the flowers that never sprouted. So, my success rate is very low, but I only bring to market what looks beautiful and delicious and fabulous. So it's kind of the same thing. Uh, there's always going to be failures. Don't expect 100%. If I plant 100 seeds, sometimes I'm happy if 3 of them become full plants. That's just what happens. And even in baseball, Barry Bonds, probably you all know him, he hit 762 home runs. That's a lot. But Christine, you know how many times he was at bat?
I can't even count that high.
9,847 at bats for
Wow.
762 home runs.
Yeah, and
And
he
not only that, he had 1,539 strikeouts. Barry Bonds struck out twice as often as he hit a home run. But do we remember that, or is he known as the home run king?
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? Yeah. And so again, it's just really, I think, illustrates for us that we have to be very realistic and practical about what our performance standards are.
It's good to be optimistic, but you know what? Be realistic. If 10% success rate is realistic, then that's what you can predict. Don't predict 100% success rate unless you can back it up. And if you can, God bless you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And really, I think at the end of the day, what we need to really think about is that community action really must establish our own standards of performance and then communicate those standards of performance. And we have to communicate to everybody. That would be our elected officials, that would be government, our public and private funders, the general public at large. The media certainly needs to know that, and to our staff and to all of our CSBG partners across the country. It's important for us to really understand that it's our success. We are not 100% successful. We're probably not even 50% successful, and it's okay that we're not.
It's okay that we're not. That's
Yeah.
important.
Yes.
Not that we shouldn't strive to be as successful as we can, just that 100% is not realistic in almost every situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now we're going to kind of come to our last calculation of this webinar is really the agency's ability to target, to kind of forecast, if you will. And it's a different formula that produces a measure of customer success that compares the number of the targeted or projected outcomes, the denominator, with the actual who achieved those outcomes.
All right, targeting benefits us in the planning and assessment stages of the ROMA cycle, and the next slide will explain how it can benefit us. So Christine, go to the next slide that we've seen most of already.
All right.
All right, back to our measurements of performance. We completed boxes 1, 2, and 3 earlier. Now we're on to box 4, which displays our projected performance for targeting success. This is not about our customers' success, but it's about our ability to predict it. If we are off by more than 20% above or below, we need to evaluate and analyze our goals for the next time. If you're within 20%, you can consider that you were successful. Here, you know what? Within 20% is a good success rate. But if you're above 20, if your success rate of targeting your numbers is more than 20% off, we need to analyze and figure out how we might make some changes for next time. In box 4, the number of families who succeeded in increased income was 5. That's the numerator. We projected that 7 families would increase income. If you look back on box 1, the top number, the numerator, 7 families. We predicted 7. But the actual number who did was 5, and we see that in box 3. 5 families increased household incomes. So we had 5 who did succeed out of 7 that we projected would increase. So 5 divided by 7 is 71%. Our ability to target was only 71%. That's how well we did at projecting it. So what do we change? Well, for next time we run this program, we could change the number of participants, maybe increase the total number that we get involved, or maybe we could assess our services and see how we can alter our services to increase the chances of success. Or maybe we need to reduce our projected success numbers. Maybe 5 successes was the most we could get out of this program. So then be realistic, reduce it to 5. I don't know what you're going to do because there's too many factors. I run the CEFS Adult Literacy Program. For my fiscal year, I'm at only about 80% of my projected learners for the fiscal year. And you know what? I see very little chance of achieving 100% of my projected numbers. But I will not change these numbers for next year, even though I'm only at 80%, because this COVID-19 really put a wrench into my plans as it did everybody else as well. So I know why my numbers are low. My numbers are low because my doors are locked. But I don't expect COVID-19 to affect next year's numbers unless it really does impact it, in which case I will change my numbers. But assuming optimistically that we will get over this hump and for fiscal year 2021, I can have my numbers. I won't change them back. My fingers are crossed. So it's up to your staff, your administrators to determine if your targeted success rate is okay. Again, if it's within 20% up or 20% down, you're probably okay. But if it's more than 20% off of your actual over your predicted, then maybe you need to reevaluate it, and maybe you need to decide what should change. Maybe the services change, maybe your predictions change. That's up to you guys. Christine, does that clarify that for you at all?
Yes, I think that's really helpful. And I think the thing that we do need to think about, particularly during this time in which, we have not navigated this ever before. So we're going to have to be open to what the potential is. I know that you will now be serving customers on the CSBG side at 200% of poverty. So that changes your numbers dramatically. That will change how you target and measure. But we also have to be very mindful that we have good product, we do good things, and so we do have a sense of what it is that we can do, how well we perform. We have to undertake many of this work up front so that we can understand what we are capable of doing and performing.
All right.
Okay.
On to our logic model.
On to the logic model. What we really hyper-focused on today is really looking at the outcome indicator and then beginning to measure those actual results. So we're viewing those as benefits in this model. So that is columns 4 and 5 in this logic model. And again, as we referenced the logic model earlier in this webinar, this is such a valuable tool for the agency. We do have to really understand the connectivity of the work that we do. And by understanding how we can follow the data, how is it that we can tell the story of the data, and this logic model helps us do that.
Yeah, it's a map. It's a visual representation. It clarifies the steps. It sets goals. It helps determine if we were successful. And most importantly, it documents our success. Notice column 3 is an outcome, which is a qualitative change. Column 4 is a quantitative outcome indicator that includes the timeline. Column 5 is our actual results, number of successes over the number of projected participants. Again, that would be box 2 from our previous slide. And Christine, these webinars are all being recorded and will be available on the IACA YouTube channel. Is that correct?
Yes, and thanks for reminding me about that. Yes, that all of these are recorded and being uploaded to the ICA YouTube channel. I just looked yesterday, and our last 2 webinars are on there. This one will be uploaded probably within the next 24 hours, would be my guess. So we'll if you want to share this with your staff, we encourage you to do this. Again, this is not meant to replace the classroom training that Susan and I do, but we're trying to plant seeds for all of you to really understand and embed Roma practices in the work that you're doing.
And it's a good way to do it distantly right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. I want to express my appreciation to all of you who are participated in today's webinar. Susan, it's always a pleasure working with you. Do we want to do this again next week?
Let's do it next week. This is so fun.
All right. Yeah, I think it is. It's really fun co-training, and it's really fun working with you, Susan, because I think you bring some just amazing insight into the work that you're doing and provide great examples. So this, a couple of things just to note, as we've noted, this is recorded. Again, it will be made available. There is a survey that will launch at the conclusion of this webinar. We would really love to have you pay attention to that survey and answer those very short questions for us. It informs our next steps. And if you don't do it today, I think you'll get another opportunity to do it in another email within the next 24 hours. So Susan,
it can help us modify to serve your needs. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. Susan, any parting words?
Christine, thank you for letting me be part of this. Again, when we're able to meet face-to-face, please invite me to your agency. I'm happy to help. My email address, swilson2, swilson, the digit 2, at cefseoc.org. I'm happy to answer any questions electronically now, face-to-face later on. We're happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thank you all. Thank you, Susan, so much. And we'll talk to you all next week. Take care.
Very good. Bye-bye.